Welcome to the show that undresses interesting subjects in and out in the news, media and life, while at the same time wallowing in news to steak fries. So, who have we got on the team tonight? Well, of course, the magic Dr. Orlando, the indefatigable Kathleen Taylor, that legendary Tyler Durden.
Jay, tell you what's good.
What's that? That marvel of sophistication, Jane Carter.
Hello.
The Dark Lord of Transylvanian pheromones, Ivo Ivanov.
Okay.
And our friend Ken Hayes, who's here to do battle with anybody who wants to say anything against.
Against?
The
There
Trumpinator.
you see, he's already started. So we've got all sorts of interesting stories to talk about. One question I would have liked to have asked, but I've been told I can't, is why can't we say pussy on the radio? If it was all right for Tom Jones to sing about a woman as a pussycat, and it was clearly all right for the now president of the US to say it, why can't I use the word pussy? I mean, you know, it just doesn't seem right.
Why are you so concerned with the word pussy?
You know, there's so many important topics in the world, and that's the one you came up with?
You seem rather fixated on that one.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many people who watch kitten, cat videos. It's obviously an important topic.
So
I mean, you
was
can't
not,
argue.
I was not aware you can't say it.
Yeah, you're not
It's
allowed-
not one of the seven
you're not
words, right?
But you're not allowed to say it. Even on television, actually, if you're a cable station, you have to pay a fee if you're going to use that in your show.
It's called the P word.
Yeah, the P
Okay,
word.
well, come on.
Which you would think would be
there's like a
P.
list of words
I
you
can
can't
say pussycat, but I'm not allowed to say pussy. Well,
so
anyway.
in reference to a cat, you can say it. What about all these? I saw the word pussy so much on TV in the last
Dude,
4
you've been
months.
watching some strange shows.
Well, I mean, what was it? NBC.
Hey, what channel is that on?
Pornhub.com.
Well, it was the big scandal. Were they bleeping that word when the infamous tape with Donald Trump?
Yeah.
They were. I didn't even notice they were bleeping. What about? I've heard it about a million times in reference to the pussy hats that the women were wearing at the march.
Well, to kind of answer the question that Jeremy posed, you kind of brought it up right there. I think that the reason you can't say it is because it still has a very derogatory connotation to it. And a prime example is exactly what Trump said. There's a prime example of how it can be used as a derogatory statement towards women.
Yeah.
That's why it's not allowed.
Accepted.
Well, my late mother, who passed away earlier on this year, a moment too soon, she would have said, as she came into your home, if you got a big cat she'd say, "Oh, what a nice pussy you've got, dear." Would not cross her mind what is going through your mind.
So are you implying that we're dirty-minded? That's why we can't
Yeah.
stand that word?
And in Australia,
You
they say-
Americans are a bit like that, you know.
A little bit, and also I think it's generational as well.
But you infamously used the word on radio.
I
on
did
live radio.
accidentally.
Not very accidentally, right?
Of course it was an accident. I didn't know what I was saying.
Well, but that's a cultural thing, Jeremy. I mean, you also used to call cigarettes fags.
Yeah.
Oh, no, he didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, going out for a quick fag. Know what I mean, Squire? Hey, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But I mean, there are other words that you use here. Spunk, for example. A man has a lot of spunk. He's got a lot of spunk to be doing that.
So I just heard on a podcast I listened to, a morning radio show out of Philadelphia, that is a highly, highly offensive word
Yes,
in your
it is.
part
In
of the
England.
world. Yeah.
Now, I noticed that Cass giggling a bit because she's been married to an Englishman, right? But you lot aren't.
Two Englishmen.
Two Englishmen.
What the
Not
hell
at the
does
same
spunk mean in England?
But
Same thing it does here.
And you're full of it.
yeah.
Have you ever had a situation, Jeremy, where your pussy brought back home a fag?
With lots of spunk.
With spunky fag.
A spunky fag.
Spunky
Now,
fag's a
you
great
see-
name for a rock band.
Yeah.
Spunky bag!
Make some noise for the spunky fags.
I'm writing that down now,
Yeah.
the spunky fags.
Better get the copyright on that one quick.
Yeah.
This is so bad.
Okay,
Oh, we've
so-
reached a new freaking.
Is it really ever
Do you think we
good?
have?
Yo, we're
think
lower than the Mariana
I'm sure
Trench, man.
I'm sure we can go lower if we try.
We can find
Lower
another
than
rock
the
layer.
Smoky Bank.
Ugh.
Oh my God.
So we've got a couple of sort of serious things. This, in fact, is the first podcast that's being recorded after the presidential inauguration, which is a very big word and difficult to spell. But what I wanted to ask about, and because we've got Ivo here, who has come from the other side of the water, and so have I, the new White House press secretary was recently forced out in front of the world's media to put out a bizarre statement that was clearly an embarrassing lie. All governments lie, yet the president's fixation with self-aggrandizement and size has led the media to being told off and warned that the new administration would hold them to account. Threatening the media? Really? Are we living in Russia or other countries where it's actually literally dangerous to criticize the leader? You could be disappeared. Now, Sean Spicer, the secretary, has dialed it back a little bit, but in dialing it back, he's got himself into trouble with the hierarchy. So, what's going on? Are we just paranoid? I'm interested to hear what you say because there is an answer to this, and I just want to know what you guys think. Let's start with Ken. We haven't spoken to Ken for a little bit.
Oh, great. First
What do you
up,
think?
Thanks. I
Are
think
we being paranoid?
yes, to a certain degree, but I think that the paranoia is caused by the wave, a tidal wave of fake news. I think that the news agencies have a serious credibility problem, and I talk about across the board, from the far right to the far left. They seem to be much more definitely in a hurry to get the story out first. They're not concerned about accuracy. They're not concerned about being authentic. It is truly a race to put as fast a spin on it as they can, no matter what the item is.
Could you name any stories that during the election or up until now, the major news outlets have put out that weren't true?
That weren't true?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there was a lot of them about Clinton, for instance.
Did the major news outlets endorse those?
Yes, I
The
can
stuff
think
about
of the
her being part of a child porn ring and stuff?
child
That
porn
wasn't
ring,
on
the
major
pizza
news.
thing. Sure it was. I saw it on Fox. I saw it on CNN. It was across the bottom of the ticker tape. They were talking about it. Those
I
kind
see
of
what
things.
you mean. Yeah. Okay.
That's putting it out.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and the point is that nobody bothers to stop and do any fact checking. Or if they do, I'm unaware. I'm unaware right now of anybody that does. And so there is a tremendous credibility problem. And when you are attacked, when you're running for office and you're attacked by the press, you do develop some paranoia about the situation. Whether the attacks are justified or not, they still occur.
Tyler.
I think that's a very good point as far as there's lack of accountability with the news organization because kind of what you brought up, the whole idea that they try and get the news out there first and beat their competition. Right. And in doing so, it's almost that they are competing for your dollar. And by doing that, they kind of have lost their way as far as what their purpose really is. I mean, it's almost like you need a watchdog over the news media itself instead of being a watchdog over your leaders.
So before we go to Dr. Orlando, I'd like you guys to know something. The foreign media have been looking very carefully since Saturday up until today's press briefing, Wednesday. So there was one briefing and then 3 conferences. And they have figured out that there has actually only been one big lie, if you want to call it a lie, and that was with the photographs of the mall, the National Mall. Everything else could be reasonably said to be what Trump said he was going to do while he was in the process of standing.
What about the voter fraud bit? That's a
And-
lie.
Well, how do you know?
I know.
No, you don't know. You think you know.
No, there's no. I mean,
It's been proven.
yeah, that's pretty much the only thing the New York Times actually decided to call a lie that comes out. They've been using the word falsehoods because Donald Trump is a pathological liar. There's no avoiding this. This guy has a penchant for lying. pathological liar. And we can go back and we can come up with fact after fact after fact. Proven lies. And
to kind of add to that point, I think you're absolutely right, because basically when you look at the idea of lying and his threatening of people, the First Amendment in his world does not apply to him.
No, the man lies nonstop. But the New York Times was very careful of never calling him a liar. They would call it falsehood, they would call it untruth, but not a lie. Finally,
why is that?
There was an interesting thing.
There was an interesting show, an entire show on why New York Times decided to call a lie the unsubstantiated claim that there were millions of voters that voted fraudulently, and they went and investigated in depth before they decided. The editor-in-chief decided, and he said, that's the one time I'm going to call him out, and I'm going to say completely there's no facts that support this claim. There's the Pew study that's been disproven, and that's his only thing that he is quoting as a basis for this statement. So
I do need to interrupt.
So why wouldn't you say that this is a lie?
The Pew study, Pew are saying today that their study was not about fraudulent voting. It was about where people were duplicated and things like that. just by the
You
by.
mean voter registration lists.
Voter registration lists and that sort of
But
thing.
that's not voter fraud.
Exactly. So, go on.
The guy says millions of people voted illegally. Millions. Why are you saying this? Because I am. Because that's what I believe in. So is this not a lie? This is a lie. And people, they have to start calling him out, because I see a troubling tendency that I've seen in my neck of the woods. I've seen Putin do this, delegitimizing the free press. One of the things that I always admired when I was growing up in a communist world was about America was the free press, the freedom of the press. We did not have this. We had one newspaper, one television station, one radio station, non-stop government propaganda. There was no press conferences. I am seeing really troubling tendencies. I am seeing the one thing that I admired so much about the United States slowly being taken away. And it's going to be gradual. It's going to start with claims like, oh, the dishonest press. Well, why is it dishonest? Because it reflects what you said, what you've done, your statements, and that's dishonest because they're focusing on it? No, they will focus on it. That's what makes this country great. They will criticizing your government and your president for all the crap that he's done is what makes this country strong.
Can I jump in for a sec, Ivo? So I found an article, I don't know if you came across it, it's the article from the Russian reporter, some advice for American reporters. Did you happen to see that?
No,
Alexander, I think I saw something like
Kovalev?
that. Yeah, Kovalev. When he kind of listed.
He basically said almost exactly what you said. He basically said, welcome to my reality, American reporters. This is what you're going to deal with. You're going to deal with what we call in my country whataboutism. And the important thing to me, the reason I'm bringing it up is because he actually said, in order to deal with somebody like Putin, and I agree that we are seeing a lot of the same delegitimization of the press that you've experienced. I'm noticing it. I don't think that Trump started it, but I'm not sure that Trump didn't start it, but he's definitely perfected it. Yeah. This guy's talking about Putin. He says, we have this thing called whataboutism, where if you try to call Putin out on his bad behavior, he just deflects the question.
He says, well, what about America? They have the same problem.
Yeah.
Why do you have human rights abuses in Russia? Well, what about Guantanamo? So the deflection, and Trump's following a template. I understand it. I mean, I've grown up with it, surrounded by blatant propaganda, and I've seen it slowly happening here. And, controlling the press, shutting them down, not answering questions at press conferences, loading the first 2 rows of the press conference with your supporters so they can clap and boo. This is dictatorship, man. This is
I'm
dictatorship
not sure
move.
that it's stemming from Trump. I think that there are people around him who are doing this, but I'm almost convinced. I think he believes some of the lies. I think he honestly thinks that things are unfair toward himself, and he's got I think he's nuts.
I don't know what's
quite
worse.
honestly.
I don't know what's worse.
I don't know what's worse
That
either.
indicates
Let's
madness.
go back
Yeah.
to Dr. Orlando.
This is going to start the same fight that we have every week. But I think, I think that the important thing, and what this guy Kovalev that Ivo and I were just talking about, the actual way that Kovalev says that the American press should be dealing with Trump is to acknowledge that these things that we're talking about are going on, but move on. The premise is that every time something like this happens, when Trump makes a statement that there were millions of people at his inauguration and there weren't, you can be sure that there's some policy or administrative goal that he has, and he's using this
He's hiding it, yeah.
to distract us. We are all everybody in the news media right now is focused on the fact that Trump did this outrageous thing.
Yeah.
Trump made this statement that we can demonstrably prove as false. Well, guess what? Prove it as false, and then talk about the stuff that's important.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. You're saying we're like looking for a Band-Aid for a scratch while somebody's carving out our internal organs.
I know how they feel, Jane.
Well, I was actually just thinking, I'm going back to the whole basic idea of lies versus falsehoods. And today, over my morning coffee, I was listening to NPR, and they had this whole idea of integrity with the media, and one of their reporters who had basically talked about the falsehoods, and she got barraged with emails of, why don't you just call a spade? It's a lie, and she said, well, first thing I did was I went to the OED and I looked up the word lie, and I noticed that, and I don't know it verbatim, but basically a deception told with evil intent. Yeah. And she said, and I don't want to, push that idea that the intent was evil, but it is definitely false. And I thought that was interesting, and I kind of thought it was also refreshing that somebody still has integrity. And I'm not going to say that, the New York Times doesn't have integrity because they said a lie. I mean, it's just, it's the word we use. That's what we use. If somebody has falsely said something, you lied. I mean, it's yeah.
Well, so it comes down to whether we think that the people saying the lies are intending to deceive people or not. And I think Trump's a little of both. He is lying, intending to deceive people, but he's believing it. He's talking himself into it because...
Well, that's what
I
compulsive
would
lie.
disagree.
I mean, he's a compulsive liar.
I think that Trump is smart enough to know that if he wants whatever he wants to get done, all he has to do is put himself in front of the camera and, for lack of a better explanation, make himself the object of ridicule by half the country, and the other half of the country can watch him do pretty much exactly what he said.
I think it's habitual. I think that he's been doing it for so long he doesn't even know.
The Russian journalist said something interesting. He said that when you pepper the media with enough, the public space with enough outrageous, lies, people got kind of desensitized to it, and then he said, in Russia, Putin has done it so much that now at some point people just question if objective reality actually exists. They're like, okay,
I don't know whether it was the same. It's just move the conversation on a little bit. I don't know if it was the same Russian reporter, but there is a Russian reporter as part of the White House press corps, and obviously well liked by the rest of the press corps. And yesterday, Sean Spicer's eventually came to this guy, who's a big, tall man, and he said, "So why don't you guys want to be friends with Russia?" Right? And some of the ladies went, "Oh, and these reporters are fairly hard-nosed individuals." But he asked what, to the Russians, the Russian people, would seem to be a perfectly reasonable question. Why don't you want to be friends with Russia?
Because Russia interfered in our elections.
But they don't know that.
Not just this.
Yeah,
I mean,
they
the
do.
human rights, the annexation of a foreign, the annexation of Crimean, a foreign country, invasion of a foreign country, the appetites towards neighboring countries. I mean, Putin wants to reassemble the Soviet Union, and that will involve taking over the Baltic republics, and he's against our allies. He wants to weaken the European Union and NATO, and of course we want to be friends with Russia. I mean, it's a giant power, but not at all cost. We can't sacrifice our allies and other people. I mean, my country is going to be taken over probably. If we just bow to Russia, to everything they want. And I think that's why, I know that Trump wants to repay favors and his buddies with Putin, and they share a lot of personality too. Yeah, and mistresses. But I think Trump's gonna meet some resistance from Republican congressmen.
Ken, you're a historian. And I know with a particular interest for the run-up to the Second World War. What do you think about from a historical point of view?
Well, I got a couple observations. First of all, I don't think that manipulating the media like this is a new thing. Historically, I've seen it done a lot. And I can use more recent examples. I mean, Bill Clinton was absolutely convinced that he did not have sexual relations with Hitler. That was the first example that popped into my head.
Because he said so.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to bag on Democrats in this. It's just that's the first one that is just
that was
going
a lie.
That was a lie, that you go out in front of the public and then you redefine what a BJ is. Okay? Later on when pushed.
Yeah, but he didn't do that for the sake of the media. That was actually in court.
No, he did. He went straight on
He went straight on
evening
TV.
news and said, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman."
So that's my point on that. There were deals that were cut when the Soviet Union collapsed. There was a deal cut between the United States and the Russian Republic, the new government that was being formed, that NATO would not push into Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. Eastern Europe was going to be no offense, a no man's land. It would be a zone in between the two that would not be influenced one way or the other. The West broke that. Okay, we brought countries in Eastern Europe into NATO because Russia actually disintegrated and fell apart at a faster, more in-depth rate than we in the West imagined it would. So the Baltic republics joined, Romania, Poland, Hungary, up and down all the way from the Black Sea to the Baltic.
True.
Then we go ahead and, if that's not bad enough, if you're sitting there as a Russian, then let's go ahead and grab the Russians by the nose and tweak them a little bit, and we'll start stationing troops in all those countries. So we moved the line that used to go down through Central Europe, we moved it into Eastern Europe. If I switched hats and think like a Russian, I cannot think of anything that would be more galling to me than having American troops right on my border. So we have been provocative towards them. In the last 2 months, under the previous president, we mobilized basically 5 brigades, which is about a division and a half worth of troops.
Poland.
And we moved them into Poland. Just sending them a little message. Well, the message is real clear. We're strengthening our defenses in Eastern Europe. The other day, the British were experimenting with whether they could move tanks through the channel or not, just in case they have to get their armor across the English Channel.
Now, you had to go there, didn't you?
Yes.
Now, we only allowed the tunnel to be built.
Oh, God.
On the understanding.
Jeremy, big idea, and this backing up what was just mentioned about the history. You have to create an enemy. The government need to have an enemy, because if you create an enemy, then your citizens don't stand up and go, wow, our system is flawed. This is really messed up what we do here.
Oh, for God's sake.
You guys can drive tanks?
We've been dealing with the French for
You're
hundreds and
spunky
hundreds and
faggots?
hundreds of years.
The point
Just
being,
saying. Think about what he's doing. He's, okay, now all of a sudden Trump is kind of moving into this, we're in the friend zone now with Russia. But look what he's doing with China. All of a sudden now he's just poking the Chinese bear.
See,
he's creating a new enemy. He wants to have, if we're going to make friends with Russia, then he's got to figure out who's going to be the new enemy. So this way, the citizens do exactly what we're supposed to do. And we don't sit there and consult with each other and maybe criticize the government.
Remind me how it is that Putin's party came into power. Something to do with Chechen rebels being blamed for killing 300 Russian citizens when it actually... When actually it was Putin's group that did that in order...
That's a lie.
Yeah, right. In order to get the power of the press.
the Chechen rebels did exist,
but they did not do that bombing.
They're kind of not really existing right now because the Russians went to work on them. But the point is that with the seizure of the school was what I meant specifically.
Oh, yeah.
That was a Chechen group that seized the
No, I'm
school.
talking about blowing up
and
an
killed a bunch
apartment
of
complex.
And slaughtered a bunch of children. I don't remember the exact parameters on that one. I'm not saying it didn't happen that way. I'm just saying I don't recall that. But I do know that they were in an awful war with each other.
I'm very proud of the fact that I have friends who were marching in Washington the other day, and in fact will be
don't have
on
friends.
my will be on my show shortly.
They went to
the
Washington to get
recent
away.
Women's March. We're not sure, but what we do know is that it was peaceful and that were very, very few arrests, and arrests nothing to do with the marching. They're not sure how many people were there, 500,000, 1 million people, they don't know. And of course many more around the world. Women, children, men travelled to Washington. I have to say, I think it's difficult to see what actual effect the march itself will have other than piss off the current president. That's not the question. The question is, in real life, should you go on a march if you know that it may well be dangerous to your health, your residential status, your job, etc.? Should you take your kids on a march if you know in advance that the president has said there will be no marches?
You're goddamn right you should.
Absolutely.
It's called
I agree.
inspiring people. If you don't, then everything that's going to happen, basically, what you have, the whole system that's flawed is just going to remain in place. Even if maybe what your specific march doesn't really have an effect, you're inspiring other marches down the line. Take the civil rights movement. One march didn't create the civil rights movement. It was march upon march upon march. It was movement upon movement upon movement. Hell yeah, you should go every single time. You should
Vietnam
never ever
War
give
didn't
up.
stop because of
Yeah.
one march.
It's important.
That is a philosophically valid answer. But what about the practical? I agree with you. I'm completely down with you. I feel like it goes a step further. I feel like it is your responsibility. If you love the notion of where you live, you need to do something. But I understood Jeremy's question to be, you have practical responsibilities that, especially in the conditions that he just laid out as a family member, do those responsibilities overpower the what I consider to be the responsibility of civil disobedience?
No, because you're teaching your children the right thing to do. You're teaching them how to inspire.
See,
So,
that's my thing.
teaching
I
them how
mean,
to be the civil
war is
activists.
probably the most terrifying thing as a parent to think about because self-sacrifice is simple, but when you have your children backed into a corner and you're worried about them, it becomes a whole new ballgame. But it's still back to integrity, back to convictions, back to beliefs and morals. No, I would take my kids. I would want them to go.
Dr. Orlando is waving. Dr. Orlando, I can see going on a march, but he has 2 young kids, and I'm interested. Would you take your wife and your kids on a march to
Without a moment's hesitation.
Hells yeah.
Yeah, but that's not the interesting question to me. The interesting question is, what about Colin Kaepernick? He's got a protest that quite literally has generated as much, if not more, attention than the Women's March, and has generated as strong a feelings for and against, if not stronger, than
Tell
the
us a
Women's
little bit
March.
more about that.
He is a football player. Basically, decided that he was going to stand up or not stand up
Kneel.
during he's actually going to kneel during the playing of the national anthem on the premise that the police are mistreating African Americans, and this is a harmless, peaceful protest that he can do to draw light to this issue. The guy is hated and reviled. Is he doing what he should? Should he have the right to do it? Should the NFL allow him to do it? Should they stop him? I just
the
want to know
problem
what,
is the
what your
national
thoughts
anthem is such a sacred thing. You know, the national anthem is pretty much the flag. You know, and when you kind of stage your protest with the backdrop of the national anthem, you're kind of protesting America in a way. You know, so that's why.
exactly his point.
Yeah, well, I don't know. The march protests certain aspect of America. The anthem also symbolizes a lot of sacrifice. A lot of people that have died defending the country, and I think this was part of the problem.
I'm sorry, but the people that he is trying to represent and saying who are mistreated in this country, they have a ton of sacrifice into this country. So he has every right to do this.
Of course.
And symbolically speaking, there's a difference between sitting down and crossing your arms and kneeling on one knee.
I find it interesting that there are a ton of people that are 100% behind the Women's March, but all of a sudden say, ho, 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 you can't disrespect our song.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I'm 100% behind Kaepernick. I'm very proud that somebody has the nerve and the willingness to do that.
I
When he has so much to lose.
Take you back to the marching and protesting, whether it's worth it. Personal experience, 1988, we had for 30 years, we had a communist dictator, Todor Zhivkov was his name. He ruled with a Trumpian fist for 3 decades, and we kind of had a Trumptatorship for quite a while, and it was tough. But finally, he gets sacked by the
Wouldn't you substitute the word Stalinist versus Trumpiest?
I know I'm pissing you off so much.
Yeah.
I'm pissing you off
You're, I don't mind if you take it to a certain point, but you're going way over the top, Slick.
Well, okay, with the Stalin fist.
Trumpian fists would be very, very small.
I know, and so I'm messing with our buddy here, but basically he got sacked by the political elite, by the communist elite in the party. And he was, because they could feel the wall in Berlin was crumbling, so they could feel that the end is near, so they figured, why don't we make like a cosmetic change? So they sacked him and they installed another communist guy. His name was Peter Mladenov. Well, the college students, who are the craziest people in any country, and they're kind of, they're intellectuals, but they're intellectuals with a lot of testosterone. So usually revolutions start right there. And so all the college students got organized immediately in these committees. We call them student committees. And we decided on the same day, I was a college student at the time, decided on the same day to strike and barricade ourselves in every university and demand actual free election, which we had not had in my lifetime. And this was unheard of. And so it happened at the same time, same hour, same day. We barricaded ourselves in each of the I was in a university downtown, Sofia, and then all the television stations and CNN was there. And CNN was extremely important at this time of transition in Eastern Europe, because they were there and they were covering what was happening, and they were pretty much the only big cable news channel at the time, and the communists were afraid in front of the cameras to do anything nefarious. But we were there for probably a week, and we lived inside the university. It was the best freaking party of my entire life. It was non-stop orgies, drinking. It was absolutely fantastic. The sense of revolution was gone completely after the second, bottle. And we were. Nobody was allowed. Professors were not allowed in the university. There was a university for dramatic arts not far from us, and we would go to each other's parties, basically. It was fantastic. It was a fantastic experience, but Peter Mladenov, the dictator, made the threat on television. He said, "We are going to send the tanks in." And, when you're 20, you think you're invincible and nothing's going to happen to you. So we were like, fuck you, spunky faggots, come on over, Wow. And so eventually, believe it or not, they succumbed. Peter Mladenov, the dictator, said, okay, we're going to have free elections, because they probably knew that the tide is coming, and there's no escaping it. But we naturally took all the credit, the college students at the time. So
Can I just ask, just to intercede very quickly, how many 25-year-olds are there now in Bulgaria? Or is there a sort of a whole age group of 25-year-olds who were conceived in the...
I see what you mean. Yeah, that was a very active time.
And are there a lot of little Evos?
Yeah,
That was such an awesome little euphemism he used. That was such an active time.
They call it euphemism. Euphemism.
But what I'm interested in is if
Ken said something really like it just in passing. Like he's like, that's how democracy is born. Have you seen the bar bill from when the Declaration of Independence was formed?
Yeah,
I mean, isn't that exactly how democracy is created?
Alcohol?
Is it?
Yeah.
Any,
Alcohol has
it's
a
no
lot
fluke
to do.
that it occurred in a the meetings were held in a tavern.
Exactly.
why do you think we have this place in the back end of a...
That's actually what the national anthem's all about.
Exactly.
There
It's
was
actually-
It's
it's
a British drinking song.
There was a sense
exactly.
of dread a little bit because parallel to what we were doing, they tried to do in Romania, but they had a far crazier dictator, Nicolae Ceausescu, and his crazy wife Elena Ceausescu, and they drowned in blood their uprising. You know, there was like a lot of people died there, and themselves they were executed. Nicolae,
TV.
yeah. on
Before
TV.
we move on, can I just bring something back around to something that Dr. Orlando was talking about earlier? So all of our famous folk, not just sports people, it seems like everybody is always griping to use your platform, speak up, be an example. And somebody finally does it, and he gets shit for it.
Oh, you're talking
Oh,
about
but
Meryl
not that
Streep.
way.
Very
not,
good, very good
not
point.
that way. I'm just like he has the mic, and because he used it in a way that other people don't agree with. Oh, but not that way.
I think history may treat him more kindly than
Very
the
good point.
current.
It's going to be interesting. These next 4 years are going to be so exciting. It's going to be
Okay, I'd
crazy.
like to ask a question, and I say this as just straight off the top. Supreme Court has rejected an appeal from Texas officials seeking to restore the state's strict voter ID law. Texas law, enacted in 2011, requires voters seeking to cast their ballots at the polls to present photo identification, like a Texas driver's or gun license, maybe a military ID or a passport. Federal courts have repeatedly ruled that the law is racially discriminatory. What is wrong with presenting a form of ID? Folk, when voting, have to present some form of ID when they go to the bank or the post office or the airport. You know, it's simple. If you get a registered letter, you've got to go and present some sort of ID. They ask for ID for all sorts of things.
You do realize you're talking about people who go to banks, post offices, other countries, and get registered letters. You're not talking about the 11% of people in this country who don't do any of those things because they're in the very small minority of people who don't have much money.
So what about the? And I'm not sure. Was this completely nationwide? The whole idea.
Texas.
No.
just
About
in general,
the
my
$5 ID that the DMV would give to you with a picture, photo ID, and proof of identification. You know what I mean? Did you hear about this?
It is, to my knowledge, it is not a nationwide thing.
Because I mean, I get the poverty thing. I just thought, well, if it really is
Well,
$5
my
to get
question,
an ID,
if I could just finish, is what is wrong with requiring a photo ID? Okay, so some people may not have a photo ID for various reasons, some of which may be very good reasons. But it's 2 years away from the next set of elections and 4 years away, all things being equal, for the next general election. Is it not beyond the wit of man, or come to that, the Wednesday night undressed team, to come up with a how to fix this?
If the government really wants to run smoothly, it wouldn't charge a fee to have a photo ID.
Yeah.
You are a citizen of the nation. You should not have to pay
they
a
just
fee
do what-
to
Did
you say
recognize.
free?
It should be. You should have
sorry,
a.
so, I just want to go back. Are we talking about
You got to pay to get
The
a
F
driver's
word.
license. Yeah, you should have a free. The government should supply you a free photo identification card.
I'm going to slightly reformat what he says because you have obviously irritated Jeremy's dander.
Good.
The ID prospects from the federal government should be paid with tax dollar.
But there's more to it than that, guys. Do you
Without
realize
question,
that
there's
to
more
get
to
an
it.
ID, you have to get a birth certificate? If you weren't born in the same state you're living in, it can cost you $175 just to send off for a birth certificate and take months. If you live in parts of Texas, the nearest place you can get an official ID might be 170 miles away. To do that, you have to take time off work, you have to get the transportation, and you have to come up with the money for it. This is a poll tax. That's illegal.
I agree. I think, and Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going to talk for you now, because I know sometimes people get confused with your weird accent. That the point of your question is really a philosophical one. Is there anything wrong with requiring an ID?
In general terms, yeah.
In general terms, no. There's nothing wrong with requiring an ID. However, we have a set of instances and policies and procedures that predate anybody sitting here at the table, which makes it a bad idea for us here.
So, Ken Hayes, I'm going to ask you,
how would you logistics and the mechanics of it being implemented? Yes, I think that everybody should have an ID to vote.
I disagree.
Right, and my question is,
Entirely.
how do we?
And I entirely feel that they should.
Well, how do you register?
Yeah, what we're doing is we're
can
asking
get-
a question: is should we or could we? And if we could, how might we go about doing it? So if we take the example of a little old lady who's 80 years old, who lives 100 miles away from the nearest place where she can get an ID to be able to vote, right? But she can coincidentally vote down the road. How might we deal with that?
Well, I'm looking at it from a different point of view. If hundreds of millions of Americans can have Social Security numbers and they can be assigned to that person, et cetera, in this day and age with technology, we should be able to get some sort of ID system in place.
You guys really see nothing wrong with being a nation that requires people to carry papers to exist?
We already carry it.
We already do.
We already require it.
Not a specific required one. They've tried to get voter ID in England for years, and every time the people have risen up and said, we are not going to require IDs in order to go about the things that we're supposed to be able to go about.
Really?
Yeah.
I am surprised. In Bulgaria, you gotta have an ID to vote.
Yeah,
in fact,
that's what it is, a legacy of
But
repressive
I
regime.
can't imagine
Kathleen,
functioning without an
in
ID.
England,
I don't know.
we
How do
both
you
have
live
some-
today without an ID?
You say that. You lose your ID
I
twice a week.
know, but then I get another one because I can't freaking
But everybody knows
function
who,
without it.
everybody
use your
knows
bank
who
card?
you are. I mean, the point I'm trying to make is if you want to vote in the UK, you have to have a voter registration card.
Right.
You have to have
That
that.
doesn't have a photo on it. It's not a photo ID in any way, means, shape, or form.
True.
I say Bernie Sanders, when he
that.
runs next time, he needs to run under a platform. All the illegals should get an ID, and Mexico should pay for it.
Okay,
I'm
let's
curious.
try. I'm actually trying to have a serious conversation here.
I'm going
in
to throw
the sense
something
of-
out here that the whole idea of just it being photo, in 10 years, it'll either be based on this or it'll be based on your retina.
And I have
based on
problems
the
with
chip.
that.
Okay,
So
why-
I got a
why-
question.
why does
I got a
Kathleen
question
have-
for Kath.
All right.
Okay. So what is it simply the fact that it is a photo versus a registration card? Is there?
You don't have to have your registration card anyway.
Okay, this is what I need to know.
Traditionally, in
Yeah.
this country, from the very beginning, you say, I am so-and-so. I live at so-and-so. I swear that I'm going to sign a piece of paper, and it's on penalty of felony that I'm signing this piece of paper. And if I'm found out to be lying about it, I can be put in jail.
Yeah,
and
but
that
that's-
has been good enough.
That's
Now,
when they trusted all the voters, though. I mean, quite legitimately, if you were white and landed, you could vote.
But the idea that you can't trust people and you require them to go out and do preliminary stuff because you don't trust people anymore, you're still signing a piece of paper that's saying that if you're faking this, you can go to jail over it. You're
Right.
committing a felony, and you recognize that fact. And it doesn't happen. This is a problem in search of a solution that's not a problem. It doesn't exist.
A solution in search of a problem.
People do not sign something saying, I might be committing a felony for the sake of a vote. They just don't do it. What they do, what I consider fraud, is suppress the vote. They pass laws that means thousands of people, such as here in Kansas in the last election, cannot vote. thousands of people just to maybe get rid of the possibility that one person here in the country illegally would vote. As if they're going to risk their status here and possibly be shipped out for the sake of one vote, as if that's going to happen.
So, making sure that I understand what you're saying, because I'm not still clear on how the registration card idea is substantially different from the voter ID.
People get a registration card to tell them where they go to vote, to tell them what their legislative districts are, and to give them addresses. That's it.
So what happens if I try to vote and I don't have this registration card?
You tell us who you are. You sign your name. We have your signature on file.
No, I'm not talking about here. I'm talking about in merry old England.
In England?
Yeah.
I didn't vote there. I wasn't, so I don't really know a whole lot about it.
You have a home address, whether you rent it or and it's sent to you a few weeks beforehand, and you either have one or you don't have one, and if you don't have a card, you don't get to vote. We're done. Oh, and by the way, in the United Kingdom, all voting is done on paper.
Well, fuck that.
No electronics at all.
Everything's
Is that just from a
recountable.
logistics point of view?
That's
You're
just
saying
from a
that?
tech guy, like, being
agree with that.
ticked off. What you got there, sir?
If you can be issued a card like this by the federal government,
He's showing us a
it's
driving
basically-
license.
No, it's a passport.
Oh, passport.
Yeah,
That's not a passport.
And then you feel all the bumps and all the information that's kept on here, and you can jump online and you can look, and it kind of gives you some ideas of what some of it is, but they won't let you look at it when they scan it, so who the hell knows what's really in this thing. My point is this, is that we are stamped, labeled,
How much did
tagged,
that cost you?
same as getting a regular passport.
Which is hundreds.
$85.
$85.
People don't have
But my
$85
point is this.
or wallets sometimes.
As humans, we are stamped, we are labeled, we are already in the system at 100 different points.
Then why
And if
does
we
it
don't
cost
fight
us?
at every step of the way, we
my-
are going to be tagged underneath the skin.
But my question to Kathleen, though, is if people have got a social security number, right? Would that, and they had to
No,
bring
that
it.
doesn't work as an I mean, that works as an identifier, but it doesn't work as a proof of identification.
Yeah, they gotta
Yeah,
match the face.
social security card.
I'm just trying to see if there's a way of.
No,
of
I get
coming
what you're
to
saying.
this.
Yeah, no,
The,
I'm
the
not-
point that I was trying to make there before I got cut
And
off.
by the way, that's not a
Sorry about
passport. That's a piece of plastic.
That's a passport.
it
that's
works as
not
a
a passport.
It's a
passport.
passport card.
You try getting
works.
into England with that.
Jeremy's
They're gonna-
old.
I've traveled with it before. I'll travel with it again. You just
They're not
swipe it
gonna
through
let
the
you
old
in.
computer system.
You try getting into Germany, they go, ha! You're what? What
My
is
point
this
is this.
for credit card? Ooh.
The way system and data and information on all of us is transferred, and I'm not saying this is wrong or right, but I think we will see identification cards in the next few years.
We don't have to accept it that easily.
Evo has a chip. Look, there it is. It's just on. That's why he keeps seeing on the end of his.
My point is this: is that
So his wife knows where he is.
the information, the data on all of us is captured somewhere, especially in the last 15 years. I mean,
Okay, I wanna finish
if
up
we were
with-
going to fight it, the fight has already gone past us.
Yeah.
It's too
We gonna
late.
be tagged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That on voter ID, it costs a lot of money as things are right now, and it acts as a poll tax and has definite negative effects on voter turnout. That's proven, total turnout, and it definitely makes a change in the type of people who are voting, which is why certain parties want to have it.
Now I want to finish up today. Something non-political.
Oh,
Okay,
thank
girls
God.
and boys. Something non-political.
Thank you.
Something that annoys everybody, with the exception of Mr. Trump, who does answer his own
Oh.
phone.
Twisted it, made it
Yeah.
political.
Only when
Here we
it's
go.
China
Nuisance
calling.
calls. Nuisance calls
What's a
to
nuisance
to
call?
your. What advice
Telemarketers.
does the panel?
Oh, Telemarketers.
What advice does the panel have to our undressed followers as to how to deal with nuisance calls? Why does blocking or using the government's www.donotcall.gov not appear to work?
'Cause
I've
it's
been
run
on
by
it
the
since
government?
2009. What has been your best response?
Well, I'm not sure what it means, but I don't get those calls ever. I mean,
Really?
I have not gotten one.
Who are you? You probably don't
I'm
even have a
serious.
picture ID.
I'm serious. I have never gotten a solicitor, anything
You're off the
for
grid.
elections, nothing.
You're
You-
off the
Nothing.
grid.
You
She's
don't
off the
get-
grid.
How is that
Never.
possible?
Okay,
You're off
we'll,
the grid
we'll
too.
start with Ken.
And I'm totally cool with it.
what's been your best response to one of those unwanted calls? You know, when you've got enough time.
New phone, who dis always works. Done that more
Sorry,
than
do
once.
that again.
New phone, who dis.
Right. Okay.
That flips them out because I get a lot of, because of my, our numbers are in real estate. They're everywhere. My picture's everywhere. You have a lot of advertising that's structured around being able to get in contact with you. So I get hit by everybody that wants to sell me signs and flyers, and so whenever it seems to be either New York or California or occasionally Puerto Rico. I haven't quite figured out that one yet, but they're telemarketers that are getting routed and they're going to sell me something. So I come at them just completely out of left field. But I know certain states seem to have more telemarketing centers than others, and my phone will at least show up with what state it is. Okay. But you know how it goes. I mean, when you're dealing with, somebody could have a number that they got in New York and then they move to Kansas and they want to buy a house. So unfortunately, I end up answering the phone professionally, and then I get stuck listening to somebody, and I'm just like, I'm just not interested. I'm sorry. And I get off the phone as fast as I can.
Dr. Orlando.
Yeah, I don't try to mess with the telemarketers. I did it for a hot minute when I was like 17 years old, and it was such back-breaking drudgery work as far as, and you're just sitting there calling people, but knowing that you're interrupting people when they're doing much more important stuff just kind of drains the soul a little bit. So usually I'm
so
just
your advice is be nice to them.
For me, yeah.
Oh, that's
Evo.
a rabbit hole, man.
Evo.
If you start being nice to them, there's a script that they follow. And
that happens every so often.
You will go on a conversation. You won't be able to escape their clutches.
You will be on a journey.
I don't necessarily. I mean, there's this app. You've heard about the robot, right? Jolly Roger. Jolly Roger. There's a great service. It's hilarious. It's called Jolly Roger Telephone Company, and. Basically, when you get a call from a telemarketer, you gotta say, "Oh, wait a second. I'm talking to my wife. I'll be right back." And then you dial this number, and the robot takes over and starts talking to the telemarketer and drives him insane. And it's hilarious. You can see it on all over the internet because the robot kind of makes pauses, and I think it's a learning robot, so it gets better every month. And so it involves this guy on a giant conversation. You just leave your phone. And they talk for until he realizes they're messing with him. But I was thinking, just as you were talking, I was thinking about several strategies. For example, one is they call you and you say, "Okay, I'm extremely interested, but I'm busy right now. Can I take your cell number and I'll call you right back?" And of course he'll say, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do this." And then you say, "Oh, is it because you don't want to be bothered while you're having dinner with your family?" Another good strategy is usually, now that I think about it, usually they ask, "How are you doing today?" And here's a good strategy. You go, "I'm fine, but Margaret from accounting's been messing with me. Man, I hate that bitch. She's driving me crazy, man. She's driving me crazy. She's inappropriate. Does all kinds of weird stuff, farts at work."
So I'll make a deal with you. If you listen to me, I'll listen to you.
And you just go on and on. It's gonna drive that person. They'll never call you again. Never, I guarantee.
So there's two of us who just don't get these calls. Kathleen, how do you deal with them?
Oh, I generally hang up. I'm boring. I don't say anything except maybe, nope, and hang up.
How about this one? This one is good. Just came up with it. So they call you and they ask you, how are you doing? And you're like, "Well, good, but I've been so busy at work." And they might ask you, "Well, what is your work?" And you say, "I work for the FCC for the no-call list." And it's a really tough job. I've been collecting these rogue companies.
Here's one for Evo, because Evo can do this with his accent, and I do it. When I get them, they call and they say whatever they're going to say, and I say, "Yes, no, I've got all that. Thank you very much indeed, very kind. But why are you calling me?" And off they go again, And I say, no, I quite understand what you're saying. I've got that, right? That's really cool. And I appreciate you calling. But why are you calling me? And you go through this about 4 times. Eventually, they have to stop. Although they've got a sales track, they want to ask, they're desperate to ask the question. And I say to them, well, look, no, I understand why you're calling and what you're selling and everything else. But when I say why, you ask me if you noticed anything about my accent. And they go, well, it doesn't seem American. You say, no, I'm English, and I live in London, which is where you are talking to me from.
Oh.
And they go, click. And then you may want to recount, Kathleen, our son's, the famous one of our very,
son,
very
when he
bored
was
teenager.
13 or 14 years old, was at home alone and received a sales call from Windows salesman. And he led them on and on and on. His voice had just changed. And finally he was getting them to come out for quotes and they put the manager on. And the manager realized, this is 20 minutes later, you're a kid! They hung up.
Even better. You gave me a good idea, Jeremy.
You can do the same thing.
Yeah, you can go with a Middle Eastern accent and say, "Oh yeah, I'm very interested in a Kirby vacuum. It's very dusty here in Aleppo." You know?
Can I vacuum up bomb particles with that?
If we had electric, yeah. All right, guys. Well, we've touched on all sorts of things, from gag orders to whether it's safe to go out with your pussy, and we'll talk another time about pink pussycat hats and nice things like that. You've been listening to Wednesday Night Undressed. I want to just say thank you to our panel for sitting and making this possible. Kathleen and Jane and Tyler and Dr. Orlando and Ken and the amazing, of course, what's his name? Oh, because we forget him. You see, he gets lost. Evo, of course. Oh, yes, because he should have a tag. And can I thank our engineers and producers? I said thank you to Kathleen. No, I have to say, and I want to say thank you to our producers, Mr. Eric and Mr. Neil. Thank you very much, guys. Yes, you've been listening to Wednesday Night Undressed.